What's up, Change the Channel podcast listeners? My name is Megan Grace, and on today's episode, I am so thrilled to welcome my dear friend and brilliant mind, Amanda. She is a New York City-based badass actor and just has so much curiosity, so many insightful things. I feel like every time I talk to her, I just wish I was recording and that all of y'all could hear it too, because she just drops gems like it's freaking raining. You're never quite sure what magical, well-articulated, curious, sweet, little juicy nugget is going to fall from the lips of this one. So I just knew I needed to have her on the podcast. We were having such a good time, and so many things were coming up for both of us in this powerful episode that I decided, instead of smushing it all into one, this is going to be a 2-part episode with Amanda. And we're going to talk about things around failure resiliency, what it feels like to be an actor. There were some other kind of fun little anecdotal things that came up on the fly, and we just trust that Spirit knew what needed to be done. And go ahead and stay tuned and come back for next week to hear her thoughts on relationships and how she has powerfully shifted and moved through a recent breakup. And I buried the lead. This is the funnest part of all. Amanda had her birthday while we were on the call. She is New York City based. I'm in Portland, and the clock struck 12 where she was, and we got to ring in and celebrate and send her into her next year on Change the Channel, which just felt so sacred and special, and you'll hear a little bit of that as well. So without further ado, this is another episode of Change the Channel podcast. So excited you're here. Let's get into it. Hello. I'm so excited to be having this conversation.
I have been so excited for this conversation. I mean, I'm Change the Channel's #1 fan, self-proclaimed, but I think it's probably true. So I've been elated. I've been so excited.
I'm so excited to connect with you too. So on the podcast today, we have my dear friend Amanda, who is an ingenious mind. She's constantly dropping these verbal gems, completely committed to living a life of changing the channel of her mindset, in her work environment, which I think is utterly fascinating, relationships. She's just kind of the whole package. Amanda is an actress and just a really special and powerful friend that I met when we were doing some leadership and personal growth work together. And so having you on the podcast today is just such a dream.
I mean, side note, I'm going to take you to all my auditions. I'm going to have you intro me, slate for me, just say what you said, and then I'll perform. Perfect. Everybody will be like, wow.
Amazing.
So, honestly, you're hired. I'm happy to be here.
Oh my gosh. Yes. May we always have the friends that give the best intros for us, because sometimes someone else can see you almost even more clearly than you can see yourself sometimes, you know?
Well, and it is funny because yes, that is true. I definitely co-sign on that. But there is also something about I'm an actor. And a lot of the time we have to do a separate tape of our audition where we just slate our name, usually our name, our height, maybe where we're based. And I don't know what it is, but it's probably the most uncomfortable thing to do on camera, because you just have to be like you, and there's no gimmick. Well, I mean, obviously, like, there are techniques that like slate in the essence of the character that you're playing, like, you know, try to make it like interesting and fun, but it's just it's such a bare space, and you just have to say those three things usually, and you're watching it back and you're like, Jesus Christ, why do I look like this? Oh my God, I sound like that? Yeah. Like there's no action or circumstance to hide the fact that this is who I am. And it's
Whoa.
one of those things that, like, it's not a hard thing to do, but I find it to be a very vulnerable thing to do. So if you did it for me, honestly, I'd be booked. Like, I'm like, great, I don't have to do that. Perfect.
Well, you can ask next time. Like, maybe we'll change the channel on their mindsets too. Like, no more introducing yourself. Have your biggest fans introduce you.
Think of that all the time of, like, you know, when you watch like wrestling matches, they're like, the announcers are like, so like, here from the Guatemala, like, they're so animated and big. And I don't know, when you go to a stand-up show, it's like they have a whole warm-up act or two, or any show before the main event. Like, there's an idea of like zhuzhing or kind of getting somebody ready to like go into battle, to go into the scene, to go into the best concert of your life, to put on a real show. That there's like, that there is this kind of like preparedness that comes along with delivering big entertainment.
I love that. I also love from what you said too, that I think it's a common feeling amongst a lot of people to be concerned about how they sound. I know sometimes even for me, I'll record the podcast and I'm like, la, 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 la. I'm not listening to myself. What do you think that is with us? Just that feeling of like, is that my voice? Is that actually me?
I think, well, interestingly enough, as an actor, I used to never want to do film because number one, I didn't really want to have a record of how I looked, what I did, what I didn't do. I found the stage to be much more freeing in that way because it was a moment. And when that moment was done, it's not like anybody could really look at it again. It's not like anybody could quote me on it. It was a feeling that we experienced in this room together that we will never have again. And that even if somebody had watched it, it wouldn't have been the same. And the thing with film is like that piece, those edits, those choices are forever. And as somebody who was uncomfortable being seen for so long, even though I am in a profession where that's kind of like the job, I think like it's a weird thing to have to reckon with, of this idea of like, this is me forever, or this was me at that time, and it's not me now, and it wasn't even me 15 minutes after the fact. Like, when you watch tapes back as an actor and you have to like go edit them, or like you have to reckon with the fact that it's never going to be perfect. You're always going to be like, oh, maybe I should have, this is not quite what I thought it was. And you have to live with that, but you're also living with it, and it exists separate from you. And I think that that's, for me, maybe as a control freak, like it's a loss of control. It's something that is very intimate and vulnerable, but is also not mine anymore. And then when somebody has an image of you that's like projected outside of you, that exists outside of you, they can make judgments about it.
That makes a lot of sense. It's interesting. It's the image that I'm getting is it's almost like kind of like, Ariel when they take when the sea witch takes her voice. It's almost like
Ursula. Yes.
Yeah.
Love her.
So as soon as the voice, as soon as whatever you've said or movement has come outside of you, it becomes like this separate entity, this thing that you created. And then yeah.
And I mean, as an actor, like that's, I think, a big reckoning that like artists go through a lot, is that I am me, this corporeal body, this performer, this artist. And what I give out to the world is a product, is something that, a skill that I do, a role that I'm playing, something for people to consume. When also that thing is so close to who you are because it is who you are, that those things like I don't like how I look here, I don't like how I sound here, all of those little like insecurities I feel like are magnified because those two things are so up against each other.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love that you're normalizing it too, because I think sometimes I mean, I see people that act or are up in front of a lot of people, and I'm like, oh, they must just be completely fine with this. This must, it's almost a channel I need to change for myself, of because someone is on the stage, they're probably more confident than me, or they probably have it more together than me. Do you know what I mean?
No, I mean, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I became an actor because it's what I feared most.
Tell me more about that. What was
Well,
that like for you?
actually, I'll say that there are two reasons. I think as a kid, I grew up very socially anxious, scared of people, did not want to talk to people, would cry if they looked at me or spoke to me. But I also found like telling jokes was funny to me, and jokes was funny to other people. And I remember, well, I don't remember. My stepdad tells me of this memory that he has of me as a 4-year-old when I went to this restaurant and I told a joke. I got up on the table of the restaurant and told a joke to the whole restaurant. And everybody laughed. And you get told when you're shy that you shouldn't be shy. You get told when you're quiet that you shouldn't be quiet. Why are you afraid? And I think that performing was a way for me, or being hokey jokey was a way for me to feel okay with being around other people, in front of other people, to give people what they wanted out of me, and feel like fun and feel exuberant, which are things that I am as a person. But for a long time, I had to detach it from the fact that, like, inside, I was just scared shitless as a person. And then as I got more into acting, the fear came up again anyway, and even more so, because at the end of the day, I think the things that you love most are also the things that bring up the most fear in you. If you didn't feel that, I don't think it would be worth anything to you to do. There are many lives I could have lived because I have other skills. But acting was the thing that I was like, this feels really oh, this is an audio format. Anyway, but
it's so good. Yeah, it's you're like, this one feels the most stretchy, the one that's like kind of creating I don't know, it almost feels like you picked the thing that was going to be the hardest because you wanted to get to know yourself the deepest. And kind of what you were saying, I love this idea of like, we fear the things we love oftentimes, those big emotions, because love brings up so much in us and can really tell what matters to you about what you love. And then when you can feel so much about something, it makes a lot of sense that fear would come in, because fear is the worry of losing whatever that is, or of something changing about it, or of, of it not being what you thought it was, or, and all the fears that come up. I'm actually curious too, speaking of fears, there's something that I've really admired about you. You and I have had conversations about this in the past, and I don't know. I feel like it's important. So in my outside perspective, I imagine going to auditions as like, I mean, kind of like my personal hell. I don't want to keep auditioning for things. I want people to like me, like
a lot of people.
like, and you talked about, I wanted to know how you prep yourself and move through this process of showing up fully, vulnerably as yourself. As we're talking about, you present a thing to people. It's come from you, then come out of you and in their hands. And what does it feel like for you if you don't get the part? So tell me a little bit about all of that process for you.
Oh, wow. I mean, it's interesting because before the pandemic, a lot of this interfacing was done in person.
Mm-hmm.
And at the beginning of my career, I almost was just like, whatever, like, take me or leave me. I would just do monologues that I like knew really well. And I would like, wouldn't really prep that much, or like, I would just feel very free, and people would call me back because they like my energy. But then if I got bigger callbacks, I would do the same not prep thing, kind of rely on this charisma, and then I wouldn't get things because I didn't prepare. Um, it was like I used most of my natural charisma up to a point, and then I would not get the part. I did that for a while and was like, I think I need more skills. And you go to class, you get these skills, you get really precious about the work that you did, the choice that you made, and like what you want people to see out of you. And then you hold that so tightly that you become emotionally constipated, and you become very like married to the idea of what you wanted to happen in that space. And then the pandemic happened, where we had to kind of take all of the things that we had learned about being in person, the rituals, the like cool down in the waiting room, the like take a little object in with you to like connect you to yourself or your ancestors or whoever, like the reason you do what you do, and you brought it to your room, where not only were you the actor, but you are now the director, you're the lighting designer, you're the editor.
Wow.
And then it kind of becomes, oh, now I have all of this quote unquote control. And I have not a 10-minute audition slot. I have the slot that I'm giving myself. So then it kind of
Wow.
became, you know, this idea of like, how do I actually give myself the constraints to feel like I don't have to do a 2-line audition 58 times until the words don't mean anything to me anymore. How do I give myself the same constraints that I used to have in the real world in my own room, with also all of this added like agency, which I actually think is quite nice. Because I can go on a vacation and do a tape with my little blue pop-up wall and a phone ring light setup.
Mm-hmm.
I can go and do an audition at 10 p.m. if I've had stuff to do all throughout the day, and this is the only time I can do it. But I think it's interesting because you still want it to feel like a moment in time. You still want it to feel like you don't have to repeat something until you get it right. It's this balance between having choices that you've made and knowing the scene and knowing that you've made your point of view on the character known, and also just like throwing it away and trusting that you did that. So it is the
Yeah.
balance of like trust and execution, and I think obviously just repetition in that way. But I am somebody who, I'll say it, I get a decent amount of auditions. I mean,
Yes, you do.
industry's kind of slow right now, but like I will say, like, I feel like I'm a pretty consistent auditioner, from what I've experienced amongst other peers and things. But I think that something that I'm working through right now is I I don't book a lot of them.
Ooh. What it Tell me about that.
I tend to either just get work from people offering it to me, or I kind of join like different groups where then I'm like put into the fold of like a new community and I do work there. But in terms of like New York procedural television dramas, I go in for a lot of them. I get called back. I get avail checked, which is basically like producers asking you when you're free, or can you confirm like these dates that you're free. I've been like brought in for producers, but I don't book the role, which in any kind of like acting, not support group, but like
Yeah. Yeah.
community, they always say like it's about the audition, it's about like those relationships. But sometimes like, but it is about the job. It is about getting it. I do think that I struggle with that.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So as you're going and you're essentially trying all these different roles, putting on all these different hats, all these different personalities, do you have some kind of a ritual or a way of caring for yourself if you didn't get the role? Disappointment is another one of my least favorite things. I avoid it like the plague. And so that's part of why I'm so fascinated with this resilient part of you, I feel like, because you go in and from the outside, I see you as like bright, shiny, hopeful, like ready, skilled, and you go out and you do this beautiful thing, and I might talk to you, a couple days later and you're like, okay, I'm going to do another one. I'm going to another one. And I'm like, your kickback time, your ability to bounce back, I think is so profound. And I want to learn from you. Do you have thought processes on that?
Um, it's interesting because I do feel like I'm in a moment of like shifting my thoughts around it, but at least up until now, um, I think the way that I've dealt with it is just by knowing that I was always going to get another audition, and that there is a momentum and a flow to life that is putting me in those arenas because of the things that I've chosen to um, either prioritize in my life or the relationships that I've like created with my agent,
Beautiful.
with different theaters, with myself. Knowing that like opportunity is not a one and done deal. And also being able to treat these auditions as an opportunity to do what you love to do, as opposed to a burden that you know you won't see the fruit from. Because I think ultimately the way that you get more comfortable with auditioning and rejection and that disappointment is just by doing it more.
Yeah.
The little incremental failures kind of become weirdly a wash. And then you're like, oh, wait, I remember I went in for that. Oh, wait, like, and it just, you become part of the fold. But I think that I've had a couple of instances where like something will really hit me, where I really, really wanted that role, where I really, really thought I was good for it, where I've gotten rejected from things I didn't even know I was rejected from because I did the development work for it. And then it was going up at a different place and I didn't even know. Like you get an email and you're like, oh, wait, oops, I guess that was a rejection. And I feel like those are, you'll always be blindsided by life. Like there's not ever a time where you can just be like, haha, check. Um, but I also feel like something that I'm shifting around and like I'm realizing that I've become resilient towards and I don't necessarily agree with anymore is like, I used to say like, I get rejected once a week as like a badge of honor and resiliency. And I'm kind of like, but what if it wasn't about rejection? Like, what are the other sides of these coins? Like they say, I feel like a popular one right now is rejection is redirection. Rejection is, like people want to rebrand it to not feel the grief of it. But for me, I'm like, how do I open myself up to the grief of it and actually foster the belief that I'm not just here to be a punching bag to rejection in my acting career, but that I'm here to do what I'm made to do, which is artist, perform, or like share who I am. So I'm actually kind of in a transition period of like maybe my winning strategies. I feel like that's a coaching term. Coping mechanisms. I feel like that's more therapy. But like, what if those things are actually what's holding me back? So I'm actually in conversation with that with myself. About how those things are working for me or not.
What a beautiful point to bring up because I mean, I've thought about a lot this idea that something that was once a tool that was so necessary and helpful can become the heaviest thing in your bag later in life, like the thing you don't need. But the thing that you needed to like get started and to get momentum and to feel strong and that kind of thing. But it sounds like you're in because isn't it it's your birthday tomorrow, right? Like you're about to leave a whole year of wisdom and step into a next kind of portal. And I love that you're just deciding. I hear you saying that we get to reevaluate over and over again. Just because a tool worked before doesn't mean that it's the tool that I want to always use, or maybe I want to try another one.
And I think, well, this is what I always find weird about therapy, is that I fully believe in understanding my past. I fully believe in taking accountability and ownership for the way I was raised, which then caused me to show up in certain ways, which then caused me to have certain patterns. I'm aware of that and I take ownership of that. And I think it spends a lot of time in the sauce of the things that I don't like. And I love everything. My mom once told me that I used the word love too liberally, and I was like, watch me. Like, I love everything. I don't care. Like, I feel like I don't want to keep watering the seeds of things that I don't want to continue doing anymore. And if we're talking about like, my birthday being a portal into what I want to bring more of or usher more of in this new year, it's for me, it's like, well, if I don't like this story, if I don't like how I've shown up in this realm of my life, what do I actually want to do instead? What are the things of like, if I don't want to feel constantly rejected by acting, what do I want to feel? I would love to feel not only accepted, but celebrated for the artistic gifts that I know that I have. Right. Kind of like that plot of land better. And then what can I reverse engineer from that to feel that way? And I will have the same circumstances. I will have auditions. I will have auditions that I don't get. I will have auditions that I do get. And also, if I'm to think about it, I probably will have more auditions that I do get from that place of I'm cultivating a place where my artistic gifts are celebrated than I'm a person who gets rejected once a week. Like those two stories are very different, and they do explain my life with the same circumstances.
That's so beautiful. And so, and what I love about both of them, and what I have been so lit up about when you talk about that, is the idea that, not resisting rejection, so you're brave to go into it, but then it almost feels like this next step is the like, okay, I've made it through the door. Now I'm anticipating being welcomed. I'm anticipating and like bracing, like opening up for the possibility of achieving the role. It almost feels like this kind of next progressive step as you're talking about it. And you're right. I do think that the type of frequency or the energy that we bring into conversation or bring into a situation oftentimes is what we're met with as well, or what comes back.
And it's hard. It's one of those things where it's like, even as I'm like hearing you reflected back to me, like the first thing I thought was like, oh yeah, easier said than done. Like there are so many feelings that go along with holding on to that resiliency story, or that like bravery story, that like proving myself story. I feel like in our culture, especially, we get a lot of affirmation in that way, in the way of like, I came up from adversity and like rejection, and now I'm on top of my game. And like it, and that's the thing, is it will be that story anyway to the outside eye. And what can I also cultivate for my own mind, my own sense of self, to just have a different landscape? Even if everybody else sees that narrative, what would be more enjoyable for me to have as a narrative? But it is so juicy and hard. It doesn't feel, even like when you hear it back, it doesn't feel easy.
Of course not. Which is why you picked acting, right? You picked the not easy.
A masochist. She's here. Woe is me. I just want to type out. This is happening. Yeah. No, I get it.
Thank you so much for listening to part 1 of my conversation with Amanda. She had me cracking up in that middle section, and then just powerfully launched into another topic. And it felt so relevant and so important that this is the funny middle where I'm going to phase us out for today's episode and allow you to sit with the channels that you hold on to around when you're anticipating going into a new situation. Do you hold on to past stories of failure? Do you see going into, having that resiliency to keep showing up again? Is that something that you feel attached to? Or are you, like Amanda, sitting kind of in this space of figuring out how much of this is for me now moving forward, and how much of that was a big part of what maybe kept me safe in the past and allowed me to get to where I am, but perhaps there is a channel to be changed around it. I leave you with that, and come back next week for part 2 of this incredible conversation with the birthday girl, actor extraordinaire, and delight, Amanda. And as always, thank you for the work that you're doing out in your specific sphere and world. You may be on a big stage with lots of people watching you, or you might be in your home with maybe just one little one's eyes on you all day. it doesn't matter the size of the audience. It matters the heart of the person involved. And all of you that are listening, I just honor and have so much appreciation for your commitment to changing channels in your mindset, in your community, and those ripples, I just deeply believe are impacting probably more people than you even know. So from the middle of center stage all the way to even just sitting in your car when you're with yourself, big audience or small audience, thank you so much. Change the Channel podcast fam for bravely and powerfully changing the channel. We'll see you next week.